Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Ame and I'm back again with another video. Please do hit subscribe so you join the family. Hit the notification bell so you are notified every single time I upload a new video. As you can tell, we're in a different space. We are doing something a lot different. We are tapping into something that I've always wanted to try out. I've always been very interested in true crime. That's all I ever watch. That is all I ever read about. You know, I am interested in these kind of things. So I decided to tap onto the true crime side of YouTube. So I will be trying out, a murder mystery podcast where we'll be discussing different murder mysteries. I wanted to start locally. So my first case will be on the sorrowful unsolved murder of Segametsi Mogomotsi. A lot of people know about her, but if you are of a younger age, it wouldn't be shocking if you don't know about her. A little quick disclaimer before we get into the video. I mean absolutely no disrespect to anybody mentioned in this video. All this is information found on the internet that I have compiled into one video. We will also be discussing the gruesome murder of a teenage girl and the dismembering of her body. So if this is a trigger, please be warned. Segametsi Mogomotsi was a 14-year-old student at Radikolo Junior Secondary School, which is located in Mochudi, Botswana. She went missing on the 5th of November 1994, and her corpse was discovered nude and dismembered in an open field the next morning, with her limbs and legs stacked together, according to some sources. Now, because this is an unsolved case, we will consider two different scenarios regarding what happened to her, as well as the statement that Mr. Molefi Matsui, who is Segametsi's stepfather, gave to the police on the 10th of November 1994. In November 1996, anthropologist Shalom Buke conducted an interview with a student who described the murder. Now, according to the student, Segametsi was selling oranges to raise money for a school trip. Some men approached her and purchased all her oranges, but they stated that they did not have change and they will go get it and return it to Segametsi. So Segametsi sat there all day and into the evening until it was nearly dark. Then these men later came back, grabbed her and put a cotton over her mouth, blindfolded and tied her hands. They drove her to a house in the woods where this attacker dismembered Segametsi, piling up arms and legs according to the request of the businessman who had ordered the crime. Another tale has Segametsi being led to a hill and a towel placed over her mouth to keep her from screaming. 3 men murdered her. One of them removed her rectum, breasts, genitalia, and tongue. Apparently, she was heard screaming in the middle of the night, but it is unclear whether this was an actual witness to the crime or it was just purely speculation. Now, on the 10th of November 1994, Molefi Matsui, who is Segametsi's stepfather, gave the police a statement. Now, according to Molefi, Mr. Mokalo Sokoje had been bugging him with a request to give him his child or assist him in finding a child that he could use in a ritual murder to start his bottle store company. Molefi maintains that he was not interested in this matter because he was not comfortable with abducting his daughter. When Mokalo didn't press him about the idea in about 3 months, he assumed that he abandoned it. Mokalo approached Molefi once more on Friday, November 14th, 1994. He pleaded once more for the child to be handed to him. However, he added a new aspect this time, providing Molefi with 1,200 pula as payment for the child, a matter that had never been raised during earlier meetings. Molefi consented to hand over his daughter Segametsi Mogomotsi to Mr. Mokalo Sokoje in return for a decent sum of money since he was financially handicapped. Mokalo also agreed to pay a 600 pula deposit on the day that he would have murdered the child and gathered the pieces that he needed from her body. Now, unfortunately, Mokalo chose not to tell Molefi of the sections of the child's body that he intended to take. Molefe went on to say that he and Mogalo had agreed that a boy named Kata Khetse, who was Mogalo's employee, would arrange how to bring Segametsi to Mogalo. They adopted this tactic because Segametsi and Kata knew one another, making it easier for Kata to capture Segametsi. The agreed upon place was Mogalo's brickyard in Mochudi, next to Boseja's store. Furthermore, Molefe and Mogalo agreed that if Kata was successful in luring and capturing the child, he would then bring her to Mrs. Manko's home in Radipororane, where they could wait later in the evening. Now, Kata then rushed to investigate the house's condition, and when he returned to the two men, he told them that the house was not locked due to the fact that the lock had been broken. Furthermore, Mogalo and Molefe agreed that if Molefe does not find the child at home later that evening, that would have meant that the plan would have been a success, and that he should then make an appointment to meet Mogalo at about 1 o'clock to collect the 600 pula deposit. Molefe then went to his Massimo once the two men had finished planning the kidnapping of Segametsi. Molefe claims that his heart began to race and cause panic at that moment. On Saturday, November 5, 1995, he slept at Massimo and then went back to Mochudi. Late that afternoon, he was made aware that his daughter Segametsi had gone missing. He entered the house and fell asleep later that night. Upon waking up from his nap, Molefe left the house and proceeded to the brickyard where he and Mogalo had agreed to meet. He was certain that if his wife discovered that he was gone, she would not complain, since she would believe that he had gone to search for Segametsi. On top of that, Molefe did not have a toilet in his yard, so his wife could also just assume that he went to relieve himself. Molefe also discovered Molefe left for Mr. Mogalo's brickyard, and when he got there, he found Mogalo Sokojwe, Isaac Monau, Sekara Apiri, Nana Khetse, and Kata Khetse waiting for him. Accompanied by them was Segametsi with her eyes and mouth tied. They were all sitting at the back of Mr. Monau's car. Molefe had thought that when he met Mogalo, he would just hand over the money and he would be allowed to leave, but he was instead instructed to take the front seat of the car. Molefe sat in the car with Mogalo and Isaac, and Mogalo proceeded to drive the car. Kata remained at the brickyard, while Segametsi was restrained at the back of the car by Sekara Apiri and Nana Khetse. Molefe claimed that he fell into shock and he was afraid that he would also be killed in order to eliminate evidence. Now, Mr. Mogalo then drove the car in the direction of the sewage ponds. Molefe claims that he couldn't breathe well at the ponds due to the stink and the shock he had. Now, when they got to the ponds, Mogalo and Isaac got off the truck, leaving Molefe alone in the front seat. Sekara, who was in the back of the car, also stepped out. The three then got the child, and despite the darkness, Molefe noticed that they had a turpilin, also known as Saile in Setswana. Nana Khetse remained seated in the car's back seat, and they stayed immobile where they were left without saying anything to each other. The three men then did what they did in the manner that they did. Molefe claims that he was paying close attention to the sound made by his daughter, who was attempting to cry but was also unable to do so since her lips were bound. But he could hear her faint voice through her nostrils. Her cries moved him deeply, but he was powerless to intervene because he had already agreed with Mogalo to have his stepdaughter killed. He considered fleeing, but he also realized that he would not be able to do so because his joints were quite weak. When they returned to the car after finishing the job, the body was wrapped in a turpilin. They then dumped the body into the back of the car, and then Molefe tried to examine the color of the turpilin, but he still couldn't. He couldn't see how Segametsi's body had been damaged, nor could he see which parts of her body were missing. They also, when they returned, they were set in the same position as when they left. The car came to a halt at the Molefe secondary school fence near Radipororana's Murula tree. Segametsi's body was dumped beneath a little motlopi tree near where they were before they drove away, and not far from there, Molefe was dropped off opposite Mr. Lucas Molepe's business. When Molefe stopped out of the car, he expected that he was going to be given the 600 pula deposit that they had agreed on. But the horror of his daughter's murder and the sound of her scream, pierced through his ears the whole time. And along all of this, with the knowledge that his life was also in danger, it made him want to get away from those guys as quickly as possible. And he even failed to question Makalo about the 600 pula they had agreed on. Now, according to Molefe, Mr. Makalo then warned him not to panic or exhibit any signs of unease that may make people suspicious of his behavior. He then says that he attempted to harden his heart, but it was tough. Molefe says that when he got home, he tried to sleep, but he couldn't. He woke up in the morning and his heart bled when he looked at the spot where his daughter used to sleep every single day. Molefe then informed his wife that he was going to the neighbors to look for Segametsi. Even though his feet were incapable of carrying his body, he persevered until he arrived to Mr. Khaitziwe Ramocha's house. He discovered them sleeping and awakened them. Khaitziwe stood up and the two men exchanged greetings. Molefe then inquired about the daughter, and Khaitziwe stated that he had not seen her. As Molefe was ready to depart, Khaitziwe stopped him and handed him a calabash of traditional beer left over from a ritual commemorating somebody's death, which is also known as Mogogha. He sat down, began drinking, but the beer did not assist him to alleviate his shock or worry. While Molefe was still drinking, a man named Moleko Nyapetsi arrived and informed them that a certain girl had been killed in Radipororwana. Molefe quickly asked if it wasn't Segametsi, as he had been missing all night. But Moleko said he couldn't confirm because he didn't know any of Molefe's children. Molefe rose and began walking back home, taking footpaths rather than car lanes. He hadn't gone far when he came upon a car traveling in the opposite direction and approaching Mr. Ramocha's yard where he had just been. Mr. Mutipisi said he was in the car and recognized Molefe as they drove by, shouting to him, "Uncle, uncle, come on in, I was searching for you." Molefe approached him and they exchanged greetings. Following pleasantries, he was informed that all was not well and that he would give him the story upon the arrival back at Molefe's residence. Molefe got into his car and he was driven back home, where he discovered the police and found his wife crying as well. Molefe had anticipated them to arrest him, believing that Makalo and his squad had been caught red-handed. He breathed a sigh of relief as the cops informed him about a young girl's passing without his involvement. They described the young girl and informed him that her body had already been moved from the scene and was sent to the hospital. Molefe informed them that based on their description, that girl was most likely Segametsi. Molefe claims to have felt his heart swell and he couldn't breathe. And his explanation for this was because he was recalling each event and how it occurred and who played what part, and that he accepted and consented to such a horrible crime. And he says that he hadn't talked to anybody about it since. And he also hadn't seen Makalo or any other persons involved in Segametsi's death since then. Segametsi's stepfather, Molefe Matsui, later retracted his statement, and he claimed that it was obtained second-hand. While the named businessmen were arrested, they were released and sparking controversy in Muchudi. In 2008, Sokoja Makalo, one of the named businessmen, asked for government compensation for wrongful conviction. In 2009, he received 300,000 pula for the damages from the government, and Makalo, who was still the leading suspect of this case, later died in 2011. The manner the murder investigation was conducted in January 1995 angered Segametsi's schoolmates and the community of Mochudi. Because of this, protest marches began in Mochudi in order to push the government to act, claiming that the murder was a ritual. On February 16, 1995, protesters set fire to the suspect's residence, and the violence extended to Gaborone. The disruptions were carried out by students from the University of Botswana, Gaborone Senior Secondary School, and Naledi Senior Secondary School. St. Joseph's College did not participate in the riots since they did not know complete facts at the time. St. Joseph's College is located on the outskirts of Gaborone, and there was no internet access at the time, which is why the information got to them late. Gaborone and surrounding areas around Mochudi were enraged. As the authorities attempted to interfere, students and other members of the community looted and set fires to stores and shops. Taxis and buses were supposedly unavailable at the time due to the circumstances, and Gaborone was closed, so students had to walk from home to school and from school to home. The people's actions, grief and anguish made it very clear that they were dissatisfied with how the government handled the situation. Rioters blamed the suspects on the government's slow investigation on the matter, and they believed that the only reason why the murder had not been solved yet was because the perpetrators were high-profile persons and they were simply looking for justice for their schoolmates. Because the situation was unstable on February 17, 1995, schools were closed down. All the way down to Ginger Road, over Maruping, and all the way to Main Mall, there were burning sites. Students from UB marched up to the National Assembly site. At the time, Dr. Masire was the president, and as a result of this conduct, the president issued an order authorizing soldiers to use live ammunition to attack protesters. The president then commissioned Scotland Yard to examine the situation, promising Botswana a report. Dr. Kenneth Goma, the opposition leader at the time, addressed the nation, pleading with the students not to fight. The students then listened and they stopped, hoping that the report would be made public at some point. But the report was not made public, and President Mogai eventually took over from President Masire. Now, Mogai's response to the students' request for the Scotland Yard report was inadequate. Botswana burst out laughing with the Setswana term recalling President Mogai's answer, in which he told the students to ask Scotland Yard and not him for the report. No one was ever charged in connection with Segametsi's heinous murder, yet the report has not yet been made public, and Segametsi's mother still has not heard from the police. Nene Mogomotsi, Segametsi's mother, sat down for a heartfelt conversation with the Miri Online in November 2014. In the interview, she stated that she still hasn't heard anything about her daughter in 20 years. She has never been contacted by the police, and she has never even seen or read the Scotland Yard report. Segametsi, who could have been 34 back in 2014, is still an extremely raw nerve for Botswana, and still is the topic of considerable controversy. What bothers her mother the most is that her husband of many years has now abandoned her and Segametsi's siblings and is now living in another yard with another woman. Nene had 5 children and is now down to 3 after the deaths of Segametsi and another child last year. Dipuo, who is Segametsi's sister, was born in 1983 and was in Standard 4 when her sister was killed. She is currently nursing her own child. Nene is fatigued and admits that she has given up on finding out what happened to her daughter. She has completely surrendered to the Almighty. Now, despite her resignation, Nene is still hopeful that the government or the Scotland Yard would tell her what happened to her daughter and they would uncover something, just anything about her daughter's death. Nene and her children occupied a one-roomed hut at the time of Segametsi's death, which added into her anguish when her poverty was revealed to the public during the investigation and the funeral. Today, Nene's family lives in better two medium-sized structures. With the little she's earned as a cleaner at the Katling District Council, Nina was able to save for better accommodation. She has since retired and has committed herself to service at the Pentecostal Holiness Church in Boseja Ward, which has provided comfort for her 20-year-old wound. The yard where Segametsi's disfigured body was dumped is located across the major road to Sikwane, besides the International Pentecostal Church, IPC. The area was wooded at the time of her death in 1994. The late Mogomotsi was given the plot in 1999, and the council constructed a house for his orphaned children, Gandhi, Kemo, Onyana, Kyamogetswe, and Hofa. Later, Impura's son Hofa was able to construct another house in the same yard. Gandhi, who is Hofa's eldest sister, claims that she relocated to the plot in 2011. Her younger siblings kept away out of fear of its past. The people in the region are still very much terrified of the scenario. They taunted them about seeing Segametsi's ghost because that's where she was dumped. Gandhi's grandmother recounts that terrible morning in 1994 when the news circulated early in the morning that a half-naked female body had been discovered, placed in the plot presently occupied by her grandkids. She claims that at the time, Gandhi and her brother Kemu were still very little, while Hofa and her other granddaughter Onyana were not born yet. Gandhi and Kemu both wanted to see the body, but she confined them inside the house. They were still very young, and it was frowned upon for children to see a corpse. She recalls that the first person to view the body was Richard, a local police officer who was recently retired. He covered the body with a box until the cops arrived and took it away. The mystery of Segametsi's murder lingers in Botswana's hearts and thoughts, a reminder of how a young promising life may be snuffed away so simply as murderers escape punishment. This is one of the most well-known unsolved crimes in Botswana and in African history. Even today, the tale of the entire experience is unknown, since there are conflicting stories of what occurred. We still don't know who murdered Segametsi Mogomotsi and why they did it. All this tragedy has taught us the significance of taking precautions to safeguard children, particularly the girl child. That we achieve such tragedies not because they are entertaining to retell, but because crimes were committed in our tranquil state, and suppressing them would never bring us to the truth. Now, thank you so much for staying with me. Please do share your thoughts in this case. Please like, comment, subscribe, and if you've made it this far, comment a purple heart. Comment down below with a purple heart. I want to see them purple hearts. Okay, thanks. Bye. And I really do hope that you guys enjoyed this video. It was sad, it was heavy. We started a bit off on a heavy note, but yeah, I really do hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye.